Today I have a message for you that is not a coincidence. You are meant to hear this. This message is a guiding light, affirming that you are on the right path, that you are exactly where you need to be in this moment. I want to share something really important with you. You know those days when everything feels tough, when it's hard to even get out of bed in the morning? Well, it's not because you're weak or lacking in determination. No way. It's because deep down, you can kind of predict how your day is going to go. Your body gets used to the same old routine, and you end up feeling stuck in a cycle of boring, everyday stuff. It's like your brain knows exactly what's going to happen, and it's not exactly thrilling. So it's no wonder you might struggle to find the motivation to jump out of bed and tackle the day ahead. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be that way. Life is full of surprises, big and small. Just because things have been a certain way in the past doesn't mean they'll stay that way forever. In fact, every new day is a chance for something unexpected and exciting to happen. But you've got to be open to it. So, instead of resigning yourself to another day of the same old routine, try to shake things up a bit. Look for opportunities to add a little excitement and spontaneity to your day. Maybe it's trying out a new hobby, taking a different route to work, or simply approaching things with a fresh perspective. I want you to think back to when you were a kid, to those times when everything felt exciting and new. Remember how you felt before a school trip? You couldn't wait to see what would happen next. You were up early, full of energy, and so excited for the adventure ahead. That feeling, my friends, is what life is all about. It's about being open to whatever comes our way and expecting the unexpected. As children, we approached life with a sense of wonder and curiosity. We didn't worry about what might go wrong or what the future held. Instead, we embraced each moment with enthusiasm and excitement. And you know what? We can still do that as adults. Life is full of surprises, both big and small. Sometimes things don't go according to plan, and that's okay. In fact, it's often those unexpected moments that lead to the greatest adventures and discoveries. So why not approach each day with the same sense of anticipation and wonder that we had as kids? When we start thinking this way, something different starts happening in our lives. We begin to see how strong we really are. That's why I encourage you to take a moment every morning, every evening, and even during the day to think about how you're feeling. Ask yourself, are you still feeling hopeful and open to possibilities? And if you're not, don't worry. Take a little break, boost your energy, and then jump back into your day with fresh energy and determination. You see, it's all about keeping that positive energy flowing. When we're feeling hopeful and excited about what's possible, amazing things can happen. But sometimes we can lose sight of that energy, especially when life gets busy or challenging. That's why it's so important to check in with ourselves regularly and make sure we're still in that zone of possibility. Understand this, when you finish a meditation, it's not enough to simply get up feeling the same way as you sat down. No, true transformation occurs when you rise with an elevated sense of self, with your heart swollen with possibility and a clear vision of your future. When you're in that special state, something amazing happens. It's like you're sending out a completely different energy into the world. Imagine your thoughts as sparks of electricity and your feelings as magnets pulling things towards you. Together, they create a powerful force that shapes what happens next in your life. But here's the important part. You need to take some time to look inward. You need to disconnect from the busyness of the outside world and focus on what's happening inside you. It's like turning down the volume on all the noise around you so you can hear your own thoughts and feelings more clearly. When you do this, something incredible occurs. You stop reacting emotionally to the same old things that used to bother you. You rise above the struggles of your past and step into a whole new reality, one that you create for yourself. Imagine it like this. You're standing on a bridge between your past and your future. On one side is all the stuff that's happened to you before, all the good and the bad, the joys and the sorrows. And on the other side is a blank canvas, just waiting for you to paint your own picture. When you disconnect from the outer world and focus on your inner world, you're taking a step onto that bridge. You're leaving behind the old and stepping into the new. And with each step, you're creating a reality that's uniquely yours. It's not always easy to do this. There are so many distractions pulling us in different directions. But when you make the effort to go within, you'll find that it gets easier over time. You'll become more attuned to your own thoughts and feelings, and you'll start to see the world in a whole new light. When my life is going through changes, or when I'm working hard to achieve something important, I follow a routine. Every morning I wake up early, even before the sun rises, because that time belongs to me. I believe in taking care of myself because I know that by doing so, I'm investing in my future. During the evening, when the day is winding down, I take a moment to look back on how my day went. I ask myself questions like, did I do well today? Where did I stumble? What can I do differently next time? These moments of reflection are really important to me. It's like I'm taking a step back to look at the bigger picture. By thinking about my day and what I could have done better, I'm actually rewiring my brain. I'm creating new pathways that will help me be better tomorrow. When I wake up early in the morning, it's not just about getting out of bed. It's about taking control of my day right from the start. It's about setting the tone for how I want the rest of my day to go. And by investing in myself during those quiet hours, I'm setting myself up for success in the future. As I reflect on my day in the evening, I'm not being hard on myself. I'm not dwelling on my mistakes. Instead, I'm looking at them as opportunities to learn and grow. Every stumble is a chance for me to become stronger and wiser. And by coming up with a new plan for the next day, I'm actively shaping my future. It's really important to realize just how powerful intention can be. When you ask yourself a question that doesn't have a specific answer, something amazing happens. Your brain's creative center kicks into gear, bringing together all sorts of different bits of information to form a brand new idea or vision. When you add emotion to that vision, something magical happens. It's like you're giving your intention a big burst of energy, bringing it to life in a whole new way. I want you to know that it is not a coincidence that you are hearing this message. You are meant to hear it, embrace it, embody it, and let it guide you towards a future of infinite possibility. When you feel differently inside of you, you pay attention to whoever or whatever caused that. And that event in and of itself is called a memory. To wait for our environment to give us relief, the quantum model of reality is about cause and effect, which means when you feel whole, you begin to heal. When you feel empowered, you're going to be successful. When you're worthy enough, you'll feel abundant. When you're in love with life and in love with yourself, you will find an equal, or it will find you. And when you are in awe of the moment, the mystical is going to bless you in a way that you never anticipated. And when you are in a state of gratitude, your job is on the way. That's causing an effect. And by the way, what is the emotional signature of gratitude? Don't you give thanks when you get something or you receive something? So then, what if you were to begin to give thanks or feel thanks before it manifested? Would your body, as the unconscious mind, believe it's in the future experience, in the present moment? Because gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. And so we don't pray in our work to have our prayers answered. We get up as if our prayers are already answered. It is that state of mind and body that I know that requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion. And the clear intention is an act of the mind and the brain. And an elevated emotion is when you open your heart. When you combine those two elements, you just move from living in your past to living in your future. So then, here's the question. Can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet? but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the experience has already occurred? And can you fall in love with a future potential that already exists in the quantum field? And how many potentials exist in the quantum field? Infinite potentials in the quantum field. Can you select a new potential in the quantum field and emotionally embrace that future reality before it's made manifest to such degree that your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and you're signaling new genes and new ways? If there's physical evidence in your brain and body to look like the experience has already happened, there's evidence there physically. By thought alone, relax, because the experience is going to find you. There's an intelligence that's giving you life right now. It's keeping your heart beating and digesting your food and organizing trillions of functions in every single cell of your body. It's organizing mutations in your DNA. There's some invisible force that's giving you life. But that same intelligence that's keeping your heart beating and digesting your food is the same intelligence that's creating supernovas in distant galaxies and causing flowers to bloom. It's both personal and universal. It's within you and it's all around you. And you can't see it and you can't smell it and you can't taste it and you can't feel it, but it is the giver of life. And it is a consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention, and it is the observer observing you into life. And you know, when I tell our advanced students, either you're going to be defined by a vision of the future or the memories of the past. And then people say, why are you so bitter? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you suffering so much? And your brain, in that emotion, you're in the emotion, which means you're in the chemical residue of the past, is going to call up the event because you're emotionally connected to it. And you're going to say, I'm this way because of that past experience. So then imagine what I do with people. We have people that have been abused. We have people that have been traumatized, that have been assaulted. We have people that have had very, very difficult pasts. And have you ever heard me say to revisit the event? Have you ever heard me say that? Never do we need to revisit the event, because once you do, you open the box. But what we want to do is overcome the emotion, because that's just what's lasting from the event. So you sit a person down, and the moment you sit them down, what do you think the body's going to do? It's going to look for something to recreate that emotion, because that's the person's identity. Are you with me still? So if I make the person, if I inspire the person to sit there, and they're sitting there, and all of a sudden they're noticing that they're hot and they're irritated and their stomach is twisting, and all of a sudden it's a group of sensations, a group of feelings that they have called all along frustration. But the different sensations, the moment you name it, it becomes an emotion. But what it is just bodily sensations. It's energy that's stuck in the body. So then I started seeing, okay, let's see if we can teach this, be able to reproduce the outcome, because that's science, right? The first one was that they all believed and accepted that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And then these people you interviewed who had had injuries that overcame. No, these are people were with cancer, MS, Lou. This Parkinson's disease got better. Yeah, just spontaneously, it's called a spontaneous for you. I mean, so I believe there was an intelligence, there was some invisible life force they were connected to that. They felt like they had lost their connection till they became separate and disconnected from. And that when they got the diagnosis, they woke up and said, man, I got to connect again, and I got to connect to my essence. And so they developed a relationship with it. Just like you develop a relationship with anybody, it takes time. You got to be present. You got to connect. You got to experience. You got to be present. All of these things are important elements. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that they realized that it was the mismanagement of their emotions and the hormones of stress that really began to create their condition. Now stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. The stress is when your body's not that of homeostasis, We have an innate mechanism in our body that returns us back to order. So then if someone cuts you off on the LA freeway, you have an emotional reaction, but 15 minutes later, you're back to driving and you're over it. Right? That's all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. Everyone's all day long, all week, all year. Yeah, so if you're reacting to like a Tyrannosaurus, Rex is chasing you, you have to make a decision. Am I going to use 20% of my energy? I'm going to use 100%. So it turns out when you're reacting to traffic 200%, all right, after reacting to your coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you, you're turning on that response, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. Because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off now, you're headed for disease, because nobody can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Well, human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems and you're producing the same biological effects. So those chemicals give the brain and body a rush of energy, and people become addicted to that rush of energy. So now they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job, they need the poor relationship. So that means they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. Why do we need the bad job or bad relationship and stay stuck? Because it's a conditioned response. So listen, if you get angry at a coworker and all of a sudden you get arousal in your brain and body, right? You get a rush of energy. When you start noticing that your body starts dropping, your brain starts noticing your energy starts dropping, you're automatically going to have the image of the coworker in order to give your body the jolt. Right? So all of a sudden people become addicted to their own thoughts, right? So these people realize that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I got it. I got to get beyond my past. I got to get beyond these emotions. I got to make some big changes. I got to break the habit of being myself. I got to stop being this person. Now that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing. All right, because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person, or you go to that place, or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change, they've got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances in life. Be mindful of that every time it comes up, to be like, okay, I'm going to think differently. I'm not going to react this way. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion, which means now their unconscious mind is believing they're living in the same past experience, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I kind of move past the word visualization because I think it kind of conjures up a little bit too much of a spiritual association. The word that's used in science is called mental rehearsal. In mental rehearsal, there's two types of mental rehearsal. There's what's called internal mental imaging, which means you're in the scene as the first person experiencing it. And then there's called external mental imaging, which is you're observing yourself in the scene. Turns out that when you are actually in the first person and not the third person, that action of rehearsing what you're doing produces the strong biological change. Now let's talk about this. You can take a group of people that have never played the piano before, and you can do a functional brain scan on them, and then you can teach them one-handed scales and chords, and they'll practice those chords 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, they grow a whole new set of circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Well, that makes sense. You learn something new. Learning is making new synaptic connections. You get your body involved with some instruction. When you get your body involved, you're going to have a new experience. Experience enriches the brain. You pay attention to what you're doing. You've got to pay attention and stay present. And if you repeat it over and over again, firing and wiring, you assemble new networks of neurons equal to your experience. Nothing new there, but you can take a group of people and you can have them close their eyes. Do a brain scan on them before the experiment. 5 days later, do a brain scan after. And for 2 hours a day, they mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people actually physically doing the exercise. So what's the relevance? Number one, when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. So the thought becomes the experience, and the brain looks like it's been playing the piano for the last 5 days, but they never lift a finger. Now, from a biological standpoint, our brains are a record of the past. They're an artifact of everything we've learned and experienced to this moment. When we prime the brain to change its circuitry before the experience, now the brain is no longer a record of the past. It's now a map to the future. And so as we warm up those brain circuits, it's more easy for us to slip into a supernatural behavior. If you take those people and you set them from the piano, and they've never played the piano before, but they've been mentally rehearsing for the last 5 days, they'll play those scales and chords like magic. They just learned how to do it just by changing their internal state. Take a group of men. You can have them close their eyes and for an hour a day, mentally rehearse doing bicep curls over and over again, and they add an emotional component called harder, stronger, more intense, and they put themselves in that first-person internal mental image. At the end of 2 weeks, they have a 13.5 increase in muscle strength, and they've never performed the activity. Not only is the brain changed to look like the experience has already occurred, now the body has changed by thought alone. The body looks like it's been working out for the last 2 weeks. So then the power of mental rehearsal, of imaging primes, the brain and body to look like the future has already occurred. And when you set the extent of your limit. And then they said, let's take a control group, just a group of people that are just average people, and we'll use the monks, and we'll teach them how to do this thing called focused concentration, what science is now called paying attention. By the way, the average human being loses their attention span 6 to 10 times a minute. That's why only a few subatomic particles actually pay attention to our mind. So he said, okay, we're gonna hook these guys up to these brain scans, particular ones called EEGs. And EEGs measure electromagnetic frequency that the brain emits. And so they took 256 electrodes and they covered their whole entire head. Can you picture these monks with the things? And then they ran all the feedback into a computer that created a holographic picture of the brain, and they were able to begin to measure brain activity. They said to these monks, be your normal self. They took 8 of them. Be your normal self. And then they said, okay, now listen, you guys, pay attention to compassion. Just close your eyes and pay attention to compassion. The moment they did that, all of a sudden, the frontal lobe lit up so much that the scientists had never seen that type of activity in that part of the brain. Now, then they took the control group and they said, all right, you guys, pay attention to one thing. And of course, what happened? My back hurts. How long is this gonna take? I don't really want to do this. Am I doing it right? I wonder what my kid's doing. I gotta buy dinner, all that stuff. And guess what happened to their frontal lobe? Meh, nothing. Now, in one particular monk, there's a part of the frontal lobe on the left side, which is really the happy spot in the brain. And this guy's left frontal lobe was so ignited that the scientists said, this guy's gotta be the happiest guy in the world. They'd never seen activity like this before. But then the scientists began to think about this, and what they said was, maybe paying attention and concentration and observation is a skill, just like tennis or golf. And you can improve it if you keep practicing it. Now think about this. The brain is the instrument that we use. It's the machinery for us to process thought. How many people accept that? And it also has some automatic processes that allow us to function. But for the most part, it's the greatest area in the body where there's the greatest number of neurons clustered together. And where you have the greatest number of neurons clustered together, you have the greatest intelligence. So the brain is the central clearinghouse of intelligence. Mind, by the way, is what the brain does. Mind is the brain in action. It's the brain at work. When we can measure a working brain, we're studying mind. So mind is when the brain is in action. So when we're using functional brain scans and we're studying how the brain works, we're studying this concept called mind. Then here's my question. If the brain is the instrument for intelligence or processing thought, and mind is what the brain does, if you can improve the way your brain works, who's doing the improving? And it's that nasty 13-letter word called consciousness. That's the only solution. Consciousnesses are self-aware, free-willed individual that is really not the body, is not the brain, and is not the mind. As a matter of fact, consciousness is what manipulates the brain to produce mind. The brain processes 400 billion bits of information every second, but we're only aware of about 2,000 of those 400 billion bits of information. And you know what those 2,000 bits of information have to do with? 3 things, and only 3 things: the body, the environment, and time. That's it. Does your back hurt? Do you have a headache? Are you tired? Is it too cold in here? Is it too bright in here? Is it too dark in here? Do you like the way the person smells sitting next to you? Do you even like the person next to you? How long's this guy gonna talk before we can break? And that's where all of our self-awareness is on. It's only on the body, the environment, and time. And yet billions of bits of information is being processed by the brain. Now, when we can take consciousness, self-awareness, and move it away from the body, the environment, and time, we no longer have to live by the laws of the body, the environment, and time. And when we're able to do that, we begin to open the door to walk into the quantum field. So then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body. Most people don't like to do this. Everybody knows this, that you keep switching on that system for an extended period of time, and you live by the arousal of fear, the arousal of pain, the arousal of suffering, the arousal of aggression. It takes energy to activate those latent systems. And when we do that, our immune system is compromised. The energy that's mobilized for emergency, for the threat in the outer environment, compromises the energy in our inner environment, and we are then more susceptible to the conditions in our outer environment. And as Greg said, you have to look at to see what keeps you in balance. And stress and living in survival is when you're not that balanced, not that homeostasis. We can tolerate that short term, but if you keep exposing yourself to the same stimulation, or you have a thought of some worst-case scenario in your mind, you're actually knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the conditioning response, the worst-case scenario, the image we create in our mind, and the emotion that we perceive is the stimulus response that's conditioning the body to subconsciously live by the arousal of fear, as an example. So that internal environment becomes compromised and the immune system dials down. And why is that? Because we are more reactionary or responding more to the environment. So, and Greg, you know this, that in a time like this, when everybody's feeling fear, that seems natural and normal. But what we're looking for is supernatural. And that's the new consciousness that has to emerge as a result of this wake-up call. This is a perfect opportunity for people to be in a retreat, but instead of being in some tent or some hut in the Himalayas, or being in some hotel, you're in the comfort of your own home. And it's true, you break from routine, and you're not going to the same place, and seeing the same people and doing the same thing. And that causes you to step outside of familiar territory. So then when we practice the inward work, when we practice meditation, as an example, and you have the ability to take a moment and be present and truly open your heart, our research shows that you are going to actually create a state of information that's no longer coming from your outer world, that there's danger in there. But when you start falling into the present moment and opening your heart, your immune system in 4 days can strengthen by 50%. Now, I know most people will say, I don't really want to do it now, it's just too hard. No, 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 this is the time. This is the time that we've been practicing for. This is the time where it matters the most.